Smoke is still in the air today. Again, it's not as bad as last time. It just gives it that orangey color, so to speak, and it looks like it's late evening already, even though it's not. What did I read today? I guess this one relates to drones around stadiums, where all of them were bad technically, with drones flying live in baseball games and delaying them. This one here says, Atlanta Falcons to use drones to clean stadium after games. The Atlanta Falcons' home Mercedes-Benz Stadium is believed to be the first professional sports venue to implement drones to clean the stadium, but they're not the only ones using new technology. Mercedes-Benz partnered with Charlotte-based Lucid Drone Technologies for D1 disinfecting drones to sanitize areas. The drones use electrostatic spraying nozzles for even distribution of medical-grade disinfecting chemicals that include an inhibitor that prevents bacteria and virus from adhering to surfaces without leaving a residue. They said they will be using 2 drones to clean up the stadium with 1 backup, so a total of 3. And it says, the Carolina Panthers appears to be the first NFL team to debut what team president Tom Glick called a, quote, germ-zapping robot that has been used in the locker rooms, office space, and other parts of the building. The first thought I would be wondering is this legal? Which kind of demonstrates the point where here, even if it's in a restricted airspace per se near the airports, if they're just flying it within the stadium, it doesn't really make sense to contact everything like the tower and all that to do this. They should be able to do it. Hopefully it will be less hysteria when more people start using it, even for things like this. The more different types of applications people use things like a drone for, then there's more opportunity to build different types of solutions. So this one was kind of interesting in relation to that. It says, how this 22-year-old college dropout started a drone company on track for $100,000 in sales. It says Neptune began studying electrical engineering in high school and picked up drones as a hobby. He wanted to build something that people enjoy and saw FPV as an entryway to building really cool tech products. Neptune and his co-founder built the prototype with off-the-shelf parts and sold it at cost in May 2017 to test the market. Now 3 years later, the New Jersey-based company sells 2 different drones priced at $130 and $400 and is on track for $100,000 in sales in 2020, according to Neptune. He's in the process of raising $1 million at $4 million valuation, he says. So that's a cool thing. Although there was this part here, it says, raising money as a black founder is, quote, weird, Neptune notes. I've been with several VCs, angel funds, and 9 times out of 10, I'm the only black founder there. Would you think race is a factor in these situations? In terms of getting opportunities like this from venture capitalists, you're discouraged because you know you'll be treated differently, because I know race is still a big issue, especially like recently. That makes me think of this article that I read. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable still when people start saying things like, I'm white and I'm sorry for it. Like, I think that's weird. I know there's a lot of stereotypes and bias. A person like me goes through racism all the time, but in some ways, it is not the answer just to blame yourself, if that makes sense. But this one was a little different. It says, I was raised in a racist home and it's been a long journey to unlearn those attitudes. Will I always be a racist? I'm a 63-year-old white man, and because I am white and a man, I've always lived a privileged life. Few people have questioned my thoughts or beliefs, and sometimes my status has blinded me from seeing my true self. I could hide and ignore my worst wrongs. When I was young, I was without a doubt a racist. I was raised in a family that considered white as the, quote, best race, and all other colors and ethnicities were inferior. Even though I was not unaware of it, racism became part of my identity. I like to think that I was open-minded enough to eventually realize my horrible flaw, and even now am learning to do better. To me, it was actually compelling to read that at first, because I know many times, even for myself, I questioned, is it really racist or are you just ignorant based on what you're taught? My parents taught me to be a racist. My father was a manager of a cattle ranch and needed to hire someone to help. There were no white men available at the time, so he hired an indigenous man. He told me that man might not last as an employee because all Indians are drunks. Sadly, after the man received his first paycheck, he left for several days and went on what my father called a, quote, bender. My father fired him when he returned. And in my mind, right then, a stereotype of indigenous people was formed. That's the interesting thing too, because it says he's a registered psychiatric nurse, and in doing his profession, that bias basically carried on, I suppose. When he saw certain people, he'd assume, okay, you're one of these guys. Fortunately, my own children did not become racist. In fact, I've learned from my children. My eldest daughter has corrected my vocabulary, for example, no longer calling indigenous peoples Indians. My youngest daughter has pointed out what's wrong with my jokes about Asian people and driving. I thought he had an interesting analogy for this too. It says, in some ways I am like an alcoholic who has stopped drinking, but must always be on guard against drinking again. I will always have my memories of who I was and how I acted, and I cannot change the fact that I was racist. Yet I cannot wallow in my past, but instead learn from it. So with that, he was kind of saying, he doesn't know in the future if he gets angry whether or not a racist remark will come out just because of his past experience. It's always going to be ingrained in you, but that's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. To me, again, I find stuff like this really interesting in terms of the psychological aspect, what makes people think the way they do, how to communicate it to them. So does that restrict things like your opportunities, for example, just based on your ethnicity with this example? And I think one unique perspective I don't think a lot of people talk about. I know for a fact that you do get stereotyped in these ways, unfortunately. For example, if you're a certain ethnicity, they'll think you're lower bottom of the barrel. There's no way you have a quote education, so they'll basically dump you into the lowest denominator, regardless of what the facts show. So I was thinking to add on that thought, I don't think a lot of people actually talk about this. For myself, I was born here in Canada. I hang around so many different types of people. I could care less about your skin color. It's more about how you act and your character. But even when I talk to people within, let's just say, an Asian community, they would say things to me, for example, in terms of things like opportunities. They will look at me and say, the reason why you aren't getting as many opportunities is because the white man thinks you are a piece of trash, for example. So as that mentality was, it'll never change, so give up the hopes that anyone will ever have an equal opportunity. With that, I'm just thinking that can't be entirely true. I know so many people of various skin colors. They're nothing like the other guy. It's more about how they grew up. So with that division, it's almost like there's two sides of the camp. They're insistent things will never change. So you basically just have to do what you have to do to survive in the best way possible. There'll never be a neutral, fair environment, I guess you could say. It makes me think, in many ways, it is both sides that perpetuate that hate and that racism, if that's what you want to say. And it makes you wonder if it'll ever be solved. I personally don't like the extreme end of it either. For example, if someone says, I'm here, for example, because the whole world is racist. That's the only reason. Like, I personally don't like it when people are like that as well, because everybody has some kind of struggle. For example, if it's not about race, go look at that person who can't even walk on their 2 feet. Everyone has some kind of struggle. But hopefully things will change, and I just appreciate it when I read perspectives like this and people are willing to put that out, because many times people aren't willing to do that. So I guess that's my contribution to the topic. Alright, see you guys later.